theoretically. There we go. Awesome.
Matt wants to join. I'll DM him the link.
Yeah, please do. Anybody who wants to join. Great. So welcome to the Habitat public issue triage for the dates. Well, for the week of January 23rd. We have a bunch of people out sick today, and that appears to be going around. So on the call with us is right now, I think, is just Nell and Garrett and myself.
Hello, take your emergency or your airborne, whatever it is, because the whole country, it seems like, is getting sick.
Oh man, yeah. I'm like, I always get a little bit paranoid because I've got travel coming up, and I hate to like get on an airplane if I'm ill. So I'm crossing my fingers and taking vitamin C pretty much every day. All right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Theoretically, can everybody see that all right?
I can.
Great.
Some feedback there.
Yep. I don't know. That was probably me.
Seems to be okay now.
All right, sweet. Oh, actually, I think it's Matt. Matt, there you go. Thank you. And welcome, Matt. All right, so we are going to look at, let's make sure the query is correct. Open issues, updated, no milestone, no project is the one thing that we're missing there. So that drops our list down to 39 from 111, which is kind of significant. Actually, all right, great. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to hit 3223 to begin with.
That was from a while ago.
Yes.
Can you click on the link to the core plans? Because this might be closed.
Theoretically, I can. Yes, that has been merged.
Okay, you can close the issue. That one's an easy one.
Perfect. Those are my favorite.
Yep.
All right. So the next one's going to be 3249. This is an RFC. It's been open for a while. I'll give everybody a second to read through it. We have no comments on it, and it's from September. So I'll just give everybody a second to read the RFC, and then we'll talk through it. All right, let's talk through it. And if you're still reading, feel free to finish up. So generally, what the RFC is kind of about is being able to use the health check to have some weight involved in leader election. So the problem defined is we have a couple of different circumstances where you might lose a leader, right? If your service goes down, you lose a leader, or your leader gets stopped, or your leader ends up on the opposite side of some network partition, you can end up losing a leader in a cluster. But that's not the only way that services can actually lose leaders, right? So if you have a service that becomes unhealthy in some other way, you could theoretically have a leader that needs to be removed from office, we'll say, which is interesting. So I think this RFC is specifically about adding in maybe the ability for the health checks to have some kind of weight involved in leader election.
I suppose this wouldn't make sense outside the U.S., but could we call the hook the 25th Amendment hook?
We probably could. So typically what we do with RFCs like this is these are not immediately actionable, and an RFC like this that would be kind of a significant change requires some feedback from the rest of the core maintainers. So, I mean, I'm inclined to say, yeah, this is a cool thing, and if somebody wanted to write a PR for it, we'd probably be willing to accept it, assuming that it matches the right pattern. But since we have no comments in our durable medium here, right, and we have no comments that show that people feel that way, we're not going to accept this just yet. So
it does have 2 hearts.
It does.
Those core maintainers.
One of them is.
Okay.
And the other is Romain, and he might as well be a core maintainer.
Totally.
I think what I would like to do is get some comments from folks on the call first about whether or not there's a strong feeling about if this is something that we would accept. And then what we'll do is we'll do like we typically do, and we'll post the link to this RFC in our announcements channel after the call, and hope that folks kind of leave some thoughts and feelings on it. So from those of us that are here, is there anybody have any concerns or any feelings on it?
It definitely makes sense to me, and like I've always felt there's been kind of a disconnect where with the health check service itself, where we don't take any kind of action. So if the health check is down, the supervisor doesn't really use that as actionable data for anything that it does. So I mean, choosing a leader is one thing, but. So yeah, it definitely makes sense. I would definitely want to get some more weigh in from Chris and or Jamie, since they're they own the service. But it definitely resonates with me.
Is that Chris M?
Yeah.
M as in Mary. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, the health check is useful in alerting right now, like monitoring basically, and almost nothing else, right? So there's no, like, technically you could write some other system to get those health checks and do something actionable, some kind of remediation, but right now we just don't do anything with it. It's
right. It's something that we expose, but we don't actually. Habitat doesn't use it. I think right now the intent is that your application can use it and react to it, but Habitat doesn't. All the supervisor does is just basically checks to see if the process is up or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's not. This would be a non-trivial PR, which doesn't at all preclude it from being accepted, but just it's not a one-liner.
Yeah, no way. You're talking kind of some significant effort, I think, on getting that in and getting it, not just getting it in, but like getting it in the appropriate shape. So what I'd like to do is, like, I think we're probably all in agreement that like a feature like this is something we would be willing to accept. I would guess it's not necessarily likely a feature that a community member would contribute, but that doesn't mean that we can't put it in help wanted. So for now, what I'm going to do is, if you all wouldn't mind leaving comments there, I'll post the link and we'll come back to this next week. And if we've got enough comments, then we'll figure out what to do with it next week. And so the next thing is going to be the RFC for package splits, which is 2548. This is another old one. I'll give everybody a second to kind of peruse it.
Sorry, I was just remembering, this has been a robust discussion for a while, but it's good to come back and reconsider.
Yeah, there's a lot of history on this one. I'll walk everybody through it again. This is like we've talked about this on the stream, kind of a whole lot of times, but I don't think that we've ever actually come to a consensus, especially within the core team itself. But the general idea is that when you're building packages in Habitat, sometimes you have a single blob of source code that might actually produce more than one artifact. And those artifacts, sometimes you don't want them to be in the same package. And so the example that we use in this RFC is Postgres, right? So with Postgres, you have Postgres libs. You've also got the actual Postgres binaries. And Postgres libs are frequently used by applications, but you don't necessarily want to install all of Postgres in order to get access to Postgres libs, right? So in the case of today, the way that we get around this is we will actually we'll source a package or depend on a package, and then just copy over the things that we want. And that kind of gets us a somewhat of a split, if you will. It's not a declarative kind of DSL or declarative syntax for saying, hey, I want to split this into two different packages. But it does get you more or less like one package that only has the libs. It just means that we have to then define a new plan and a new package for those libs, right? So the only remaining thing to worth discussing is probably what Chris has posted on November 8th, which is you can still end up in a situation today where you need both core GCC and core GCC libs. And if you're using both of those things in a single build, what you end up with, well, I guess if you need them both available during build time, you get multiple copies of the same libraries that are going to be available. You could end up in a situation where your binaries or your software that you are building gets linked to the wrong package. Like that is a corner case, but it is theoretically possible. So the general idea, the general remaining idea is kind of having a declarative split syntax could provide a way to have a build break out and kind of depend on itself in sync, as opposed to having two totally independent builds that both have their own plan, right?
I'm open to it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's several patterns that you can attack with this with, and I've seen, looking at the issue, I see a couple, like so sourcing one is one. Another would be to have separate. There's nothing preventing you from having multiple plans attached to your source. So you might have Habitat, plan 1, plan 2. Obviously you name them better, but a plan for different builds. I guess the both of those patterns, like the potential problem I see is that, like, ideally what you'd want is to be able to have like your multiple packages based off the exact same build, whereas both those patterns assume a different build. I mean, you may be building the same thing, but like you said, Ian, there's no guarantee in that case. There's no guarantee that those bits are going to align. Whereas if you could more declaratively split off that build, there is that guarantee that, okay, here's two different packages off of one build, and I know that everything's linked up properly.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, a change like this, and we've kind of talked about it before, but a change like this is dramatic in the Habitat system.
It's not only dramatic, but it's dramatic not only internally, but it's dramatic in terms of like API surface as well. Like, it's however we would want to approach this, we want to approach it very carefully and do the right thing. And there's multiple ways that I could see us attacking this. One is to have some kind of a declarative way of splitting the package. Two is to expose different hooks so that you could have like maybe different ways of of a do install, where you could have a do install for, you know, multiple do installs, you know, so to speak. But however you do it, we would want to approach this very, very carefully.
Yeah. So and because so for anybody who doesn't realize, any change to the build program, it kind of trickles out to every part of the habitat stack. And that's kind of a side effect of pushing all of your runtime concerns all the way to the left, right? The way that we operate with our determinism and everything else gets affected, and that means that Builder would be affected by this. So it's the kind of change that, like, it might be a really good feature from the regards of like managing and maintaining software. Chances are, though, a change like this is dramatic enough to consider it a breaking change. And aside from a breaking change, it could be considered like a major version change.
And I think that in order for something like this to be accepted, we want to see I see some noise here on this RFC, but I don't see. This would have to be I think this would need to be more of a burning issue before we really seriously took on this work.
Yep.
In my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm inclined, this has been open long enough, I'm kind of inclined to close it out. And, you know, that doesn't preclude anybody from coming back and commenting on the issue and saying, hey, like, I really think that this is a huge mistake, that we're ignoring this for now. But I'm inclined to close it until we've got, you know, a significant number of comments or a significant amount of involvement on the issue.
I agree.
Agreed.
All right, cool. Let's close this one.
Right,
I'm going to comment.
Before we move on to the next one, we've got some hot breaking news. It turns out the DevOps.com in their DevOps dozen named Habitat the most innovative DevOps solution of the year.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. It just came out on Twitter. So, huzzah.
Nice.
Thank you to our whole community who's been a part of this. Coincidentally, the same day the Oscar nominations were announced. So I'll think of us as riding this wave.
Well, we all know which of those is more important.
I'll be right back and refill my coffee.
Awesome. Feels good to get an old issue like this closed out, even if it's a kind of thing that's kind of like feels hard to do when you're like, oh yeah, I could see this feature being really useful. Part of maintaining an open source project is just making sure that some of this stuff is cleared out if you don't get enough of a response. So
yeah, it's clutter in the open source psyche. I don't know. I need to think through that metaphor more, but yes to what you said.
Yep. Awesome. So let's move on to 3303. Give everybody a second here.
I was actually just running into this, or parts of the things that are mentioned here when working on the tar exporter last week.
Yeah. So this RFC, for those of you on the stream, it's effectively like it's talking specifically about transitive dependencies, second order or greater dependencies, right? So Habitat, in the way that we have designed Habitat, if you don't explicitly declare a second order dependency inside of your package that you need to link against, then you're not going to be able to link against it appropriately. Like, so technically speaking, you might be able to hack that to behave that way inside your build, but at runtime, there's basically not going to be any guarantees on that. But primarily, this is all about build time and the way that linking happens. So if you have a package that depends on another package, we'll say package foo, and package foo depends on package bar, and your app actually needs a library from package bar, if you expect your binary to be linked appropriately, you have to depend on both of those dependencies. You can't just depend on the first order dependency and expect that the second order dependency gets linked in appropriately. So this RFC is about theoretically changing that. We've had, this is probably the third time I think we've had this issue, like this specifically be mentioned. We've had a couple of other folks open issues about this in the past. And historically, what we've decided was we don't want to allow linking of those second order dependencies. And part of the reason why is because it's basically a foot gun. Like if a transitive dependency is something that your app relies on in order to link against at build time, and you don't include it in your package, and later on the first order dependency that you're using no longer needs that transitive dependency and it gets removed, then because of the way Habitat builds, your package is just not going to build anymore.
Right. I mean, if you depend on that package, it's really, I mean, philosophically, it's not a transitive dependency.
Exactly.
And so you need to, I think what we're saying here is that you need to treat them as first level dependencies. You know, if your build truly will break if a particular thing is not present, then that is a first level dependency. You need to declare that in your build depths.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's the philosophy that we've been operating on. I'm inclined again to close this, but what we'll do is we'll see if we can't get some more comments out on this issue, because right now it's just the individual who submitted it and Romain are the only people who have commented on it. I am personally not inclined to accept a change that makes it possible to do kind of that black magic. But I would like to get some of the other core maintainers to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, changing anything with plan build. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before, but just to add, it's so agile, but there's so many different scenarios that goes through the build system, and it's just you want to be extremely careful. And so if there's a way to solve this without changing the build system, then great. That, to me, when I look at this issue, I guess the biggest sticking point I would see, and I haven't read all the comments, maybe somebody actually mentioned this, is if like maybe you have there's hundreds of these transitive dependencies that it would just be like a major thorough pain in the butt, all of those. And one can argue whether or not that's an excuse, but I could see that as a pain point that would inspire the desire for this. But yeah, I would, given the fact that we haven't seen a lot of movement here, and again, we just want to be very with the work that we do here. I would agree that closing this out for now is the right thing to do.
Cool. Nell, did you have any thoughts, or Garrett?
Sorry, someone's been pinging me. But I agree with getting some more discussion on that, and I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and see how the things I was seeing with the tar exporter could be made easier or made harder based on this RFC.
Great. Yeah. Cool. So then we'll leave it open for now. We'll leave it open for one more week, just like the other one, and then try to get some comments on it. If we don't have any comments on it next week, since we have 2 maintainers that are kind of inclined to close it, then we'll end up doing that. But I will post a link for this one as well into the announcements channel after the call. All right. Let's move on to 4060. Hey, if there's a way to do it, that would be a really great feature. Yep. It's always frustrating when you are used to standard CLI keystrokes and you don't have access to them anymore.
Yep.
So this
I wonder if that's a busy box.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be a busy box thing. I mean, I would guess probably it's a busy box thing. So I'm not sure if it's even possible, but we should definitely, like, if somebody figures out a way to do it, I would definitely accept the PR. So I'm going to dump that into help wanted. And let's move on to 4063. Give everybody a second to read. Yeah, this is something I was really hoping we would be able to get into the composites feature, to be honest, because this was like my primary use case when back when we started that work as well, which is a need to have shared files and configuration for multiple processes on a single machine, like a single file system. And this is like a pretty common one in Ruby land. And I know that like Rob Kidd has spent some significant amount of cycles trying to get the Chef supermarket habitized, and this is something that he needs as well. And so he has a pattern right for it, but it effectively involves like depending on another different service that the supervisor starts, and using that system to manage both separate habitat services. So it's a pretty weird pattern that doesn't feel great as a user who has that need and that use case. There's a few different things all in this thread, so I'm gonna just reply specifically to the spawning multiple processes on a single instance of the supervisor. I'm wondering if the threading work that Jamie is doing might actually be the effort needed to unblock a feature like this.
Yeah, I would question that too.
Is this something that we would see ourselves adding, or something that that we would accept if somebody else were to write?
It would definitely be useful from the Rails side. I mean, the symlinking thing we do in the Ruby scaffolding, which you mentioned, it works, but it feels a little hacky.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, and aside from that, like, it doesn't 100% solve for the full use case. And binding doesn't exactly get you there either, because binding is going to be more about your network connectivity and sending data between two services. It doesn't actually get you anything with regards to your local file system. So this is a thing that this is a feature that I think would be beneficial not just in bare metal, but could theoretically be beneficial inside of containers as well. When we're talking about like composites, or we're talking about the sidecar pattern, composites get us some of this behavior, but not all of it. And yeah, so I'm inclined to accept it, even if it's just under help wanted initially.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll put it in help wanted for now. I will also say for anybody that's watching this stream, this feature is another one that would probably be pretty gnarly to write, because you're talking changes to the supervisor in order to get this to behave. And you could also theoretically be talking about, depending on implementation, you could also be talking about changes to the run hooks and lifecycle hooks. So I'll put it in help wanted for now, and when we do our run through again of our help wanted to reorganize, we'll see where this lands. But for now, we'll put it in help wanted. All right, 4066.
I don't know the reason offhand why we limit it to that.
I think that I actually do know that. But Matt, feel free to jump in.
I was just going to say it does seem awfully conservative.
So the reason why I think is because, well, actually, he kind of has the answer right here, right? Like, this is part of the gossip. So any file that you upload is going to actually go across the wire and get gossiped around. So if you have a file that's much larger than this, you could end up in just basically totally crushing the gossip mesh. And so that is to say, like, maybe this points to missing a feature that is, I don't know, maybe like some kind of an upload that's going to go direct to a single node, but we have to be really, really careful about that, the size of the files that we're gossiping around, because if it's anything too big, it's just not, it'll just not work. It'll just crush your services. Yeah,
I can see that. However, if you want to upload a file, usually the intention is you want that file to be on every single node. But yeah, I mean, there's a balance here for sure. Usually you want your configuration files, like 4096 seems conservative, but like I don't think I don't think like we would ever make this like a gigabyte or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe we raise it to, like a couple megs, or, I'm just shooting numbers out of the top of my head right now. But I think we could still keep it relatively conservative, but not quite so restrictive.
Yeah. And for it, I feel this pain because, like, I've been using the have file upload kind of with some keys of my own. Depending on the size of that, like even a couple megs, if you're talking like a cluster of habitat supervisors that's like 400, 500 instances, and you upload a meg or 2 megs, I feel like the potential for havoc, even at that size, being, a file being gossiped across a ring that large could be pretty destructive. But that being said, I think like what needs to happen with this issue specifically is that we need to have some discussion around it. We need to get stakeholders in on it, which I think specifically are going to be the folks who have spent a lot of time in the supervisor code and in Butterfly, which I believe is mostly Jamie, Fletcher, Chris, myself, and Adam. But they're all going to have a much better handle on the why we went with that specific size, aside from what I've just told you. So I'm going to wait to accept or close this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a quick comment on it and ask for some feedback from the folks who have spent time in the supervisor code. And then what we'll do is we'll go from there. We'll figure out if it's something that we actually can change, or if there was some extensive testing around this in advance. So give me just 1 second to type up a quick comment. All right, I got a comment in there. Let's go ahead and move on to 4091. Give everybody a second to read through.
What's an RFE?
I think request for evaluation.
Ah, okay.
Either that or it's a request for Ian.
I was gonna go with request for elephants, just because I like elephants.
I like this idea a lot.
I do too.
Yeah, so I honestly had the same thought like earlier this week. I was turning up, or not earlier this week, a couple weeks ago, I guess. I was testing out my concourse packages, and one of the activities that I have to do in my turning on my concourse instances is that I have to generate these little keys. They're pretty small, but I have to generate the keys, and then I have to split the keys up, and kind of I've been using the hab file upload to kind of upload those keys to the right place. The other part of that is that I've got uh, um, aside from the keys, I also have a bunch of passwords and things that have to be input because there's some state there. You have to create user accounts, etc. So the ability to just kind of have a helper that like does the thing would be pretty awesome.
I would support this. It might be something we can mark as help wanted. If a community member wants to input that, by all means. I'm not sure if it's something we'd prioritize for the core team at this time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and also there are particular ways that this sort of thing gets done in Node a lot and in JSON a lot, and there are particular paradigms they have around how to generate that spoofed data or that random data. So it might be something to consider to be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so are we all in agreement that like if somebody were to write this, we would totally accept it?
Yep.
Cool.
I think so, yeah.
Awesome. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and accept this. So this is going to go, I believe some of this will be, let me think about this. Actually, it would be in the supervisor, not the plan build. Actually, it probably is both. I have no idea what level of effort would be involved in doing something like this, but it's a pretty cool feature. You would end up having to write some Rust because you're talking about a new template helper. So that's good. And I'm going to put it into help wanted, and I'm going to switch it off from an RFE. And I'm going to leave a quick comment. Awesome. All right, let's do one more. 3025. It's another one from Irving. Well, this seems like perhaps we need to get some more feedback because we have a mixture of feelings on this thread.
Yeah, I mean, my own inclination is I'd be reticent to implement this. I mean, one is it is tricky because, so let's say, I mean, like, so at first blush, it looks like naturally, of course, that's what you want. But if you were to implement it, so let's say, 9631 is taken and you find, I don't know, 9632. That's great in terms of now you've got a, now that you've started up the supervisor now has a port that it's listening on. But all the other the peering supervisors have to have an awareness of that same port. So it seems like I kind of agree with that second to the last comment. Like this feels more of an infrastructure concern to me that you'd want to have control of outside of Habitat. That's my own personal take on it.
Yeah, this provisioning as well. So let's do this. Matt, if you get a minute, if you could leave a quick comment saying as such, and I'll post a link to this RFC as well into the announcements after the call. I'll leave my thoughts and feelings in there as well. These remaining RFCs that have been open for a while are likely going to get closed out next week. So we'll give them all one more week to see if we can get some consensus, and then if not, we'll just close them. So that, I think, is going to be it for this week. So we'll give everybody 2 minutes back, and we'll see you all in 7 days for our next stream. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.